Definition, writing a media tie-in novel like a Star Trek novel or a movie novelization, it is more collaborative than just sitting down and inventing your world. Not only are you working with your editor, you're working with the licensor and the movie and TV people to varying degrees. And for something like Star Trek, you're basically collaborating with 50 years of writers and directors who have already built up the world and set the rules and used up all the good ideas. Oh, did I say that?
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to an all-new episode of the Chronic Rift podcast on Facebook Live. It's your old pal, John S. Drew here. It's July 1st, 2018. We are now at the halfway point for the year 2018. And I'm sure for many of us, we can't wait for the end of it because it hasn't been all that great. But there have been some great moments here on the Chronic Rift, including today where I got the chance to speak with an old friend of the Rift, Greg Cox. I interviewed him earlier this week, and in a short few moments, we'll be playing that interview as we talk about media tie-in novels and his very special award that he has received for his longevity in that field. But before we get to that, I wanted to bring something to the table. I know for many of us, we grew up in the 80s and hung out in arcades and loved games like Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man and Space Invaders and, oh my God, I mean, I could think of so many other games like Frogger, Recently, I discovered these little guys, Now, you look at it, it looks like, first of all, a keychain, all right? I don't know what kind of keys you would put on this type of thing because this thing is actually pretty heavy. It's called a tiny arcade. Now, this one is for Pac-Man. There are 4 altogether. I actually only have 3. I've got Space Invaders. But the recreation of the cabinet is incredibly, I know, I'm trying to get used to the direction of the camera here. And here's Ms. Pac-Man. I just need Galaxian. There's 4 in the set altogether. Now, it's not just, though, the recreation of the cabinet. All right, I'm going to try and get this up here to the screen and turn this on. And as you can see, it recreates not only a visual, but here we go, trying to find. It actually plays the game. Now I can't see exactly what I'm doing here, but let me see if I can do this without screwing up and at least hit one power pellet. But not that way. Oh well. Oh well. But as you can see, it actually does, and they all do that. They all play their various games. Ms. Pac-Man, it's a faithful recreation of it with the sounds. Now the thing is, these would normally cost you $1,000 if you wanted your own unit here for your house and such. These little fellas cost $20 each, roughly thereabouts, depending on where you get them. If you're doing eBay, you can get them as low as $14 each if you're willing to be patient, which is what I'm willing to be patient for Galaxian. But it's just a lot of fun. And while I've still got eyesight, before I get too old, I don't know, you can't hear the sounds as much on this one. Oh, there you go. So, and this one even has the little UFOs coming across the screen. Just really cute. So, I'm going to put some links up for those if you are an old-time arcade game aficionado. They're just really cool. $20 each. I'll put links up for them on Amazon if you want to just grab them there. And in fact, I urge everybody, if you are a user of Amazon, please head to the Chronic Rift page, click on our link there, and do your shopping through that, because when you do, you're also supporting the show because we get a little bit of kickback, so to speak, from Amazon for referrals, especially now that Amazon Prime Day is coming up. July 16th, I believe, is what they said it's going to be. So anyway, let's get into this here. My interview with Greg Cox, who joined me earlier this week by phone on Skype to talk about media tie-in novels. His work in Well, when you see this, Greg is a longtime writer of media tie-in novels dating all the way back to 1992. And if you can think of a media property, he's probably written for it. And if not, he will at some point because that's how prolific he is. So we're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, Greg and I will be talking media tie-in novels.
Emergency. Batman speaking. Warning all of you to brace yourselves for big news.
The biggest.
Tell them, Robin.
Holy superlatives, Batman. It's really exciting.
Greetings, citizens. Join me, your old bat chum, John S. Drew, on my journey to discover what it is I love about the classic 1966 Batman television series on the Batcave podcast. Each episode, I'm joined by a guest host as we review the classic television series. There's a new episode every 2 weeks. Same bat time, same bat channel on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or at thebatcavepodcast.com.
Holy memoranda, folks. Make a note not to miss it.
Good thinking, Robin.
What the hell is this, the wonderful Billy Flynn?
Just some podcast that's supposed to be geeky. Podcasting's Rich Siegfried.
Did you try it?
I'm not going to try it. You try it.
Screw that noise. I'm not going to try it. Hey, Flintstress, let's get Mikey.
Do you mean critically acclaimed comedy rock star Mikey Mason, who hosts the Beer Powered Time Machine podcast?
Yeah.
But he won't listen. He hates everything.
Hi, I'm critically acclaimed comedy rock star Mikey Mason. I don't often listen to podcasts, but when I do, make mine Geek Radio Daily.
Hey man, that's a different promo.
Between love and madness lies Geek Radio Daily.
That's kind of accurate.
There are some things money can't buy.
GRD is free online.
Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Geek Radio Daily.
We'll take it.
Geek Radio Daily. All the geek without the wait. GeekRadioDaily.com.
And I'm joined here on the line by phone, Mr. Greg Cox. Greg is actually a longtime participant here in the Chronic Rift, going all the way back to our public access days. First episode, actually, from the first season that he appeared in was one of our more popular ones on Frankenstein.
They only had an hour and a half of the movie, didn't they?
Well, I think we all ought to get together and produce a Frankenstein movie the way Mary Shelley wrote it. It's never been done.
Great movie.
Starting with a ship stuck in the ice, right? And this dog sled coming along with Frankenstein and ending with a monster running off into the distance.
Would you think though that anybody would see it, though?
Well, it would have to be on public television on 6
Oh, no,
hours.
it'd be a sensation.
Well, it's a short enough novel you could probably do it. And the scenes in Mont Blanc, I mean, those are really visual. The whole thing when he's sailing down the Arve before he meets the monster, he actually talks to the monster.
Yeah, but if you don't
over the
have
glacier?
Sting selling the movie, or you don't have Gene Wilder making it into a comedy, if you've got the real true.
You've got enough atrocities in that book to keep it going. You've got a murdered kid. You've got.
What I'm trying to say. In terms
Welcome to the podcast here on Facebook Live, Glenn. Wow, Greg Cox. Why do I keep saying Glenn?
I have theories, but we won't get into that.
Well, welcome, Greg.
Mutual friends, I think.
Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm thinking of Glenn Howman.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, but who's also part of the old crowd, as it were, since we're being nostalgic about the good old days of the '90s or whatever.
Yes.
But yes, I'm glad to be back.
So
in the new modern podcast era.
The new modern podcast era, where we're kind of, even though you're by phone here, this is still video. We'll actually be running this on Sunday morning here on our Facebook Live video feed. So you'll be able to watch it as well. Now, Greg, you're being honored at the upcoming San Diego Comic-Con by the International Association of Media Tie-In Writers, and that's why I wanted to bring you on board here, was to talk a little about this particular honor. But before we even get into that, the International Association of Media Tie-In Writers, that's a pretty impressive sounding name there. What is this group all about?
Well, it was started several years ago because, whereas in fact odd to fill a void in a way, because even though, media tie-in novels, by which we mean, say movie novelizations or Star Trek novels or Dark Shadows novels or novels based on games, have been around, in fact, since the silent era. There was not an official organization for media tie-in writers. There are organizations for mystery writers, for science fiction writers, for romance writers, but those of us who write, Star Wars novels or whatever didn't have a group where we could just sort of network and compare notes and, hey, have you heard that so-and-so just picked up the license to Logan's Run or whatever, and to socialize. So, yeah, I think it was actually Max Allen Collins and Lee Goldberg who started the organization, what is now several years ago. And as you're about to lead into, they also give out every year the Scribe Awards, which are the awards given to the best or, media tie-in writers, just as there are awards for the science fiction, romance, mystery, westerns, etc. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yep. Now, you talk about the Scribe Awards, and I know this has been somewhat of a controversy among certain quarters and such, that many look at media tie-in work as not real fiction. And in some ways, some say the Scribe Awards are the answer to that, to allow to at least recognize media tie-in, because it's felt that it is jilted at certain awards like the Nebulas or the Hugos. I can't think of one that has been yet. Has it, in terms of being nominated? TV shows, yes. Movies, yes. But not the actual fiction, which is ironic that they wouldn't recognize it.
Yeah, that was also one of the reasons for the Scribes, is that for whatever reason, no, the odds that the Hugo or the Nebula or the World Fantasy Award are ever going to go to, a movie novelization are unlikely for all sorts of issues and you could even argue both, of course, that maybe that's not really what the Hugos are intended to do, but yeah, there was no, we tend to get sort of, locked out of the other award candidates because, it's a Star Trek novel, so it's not a real science fiction novel or whatever, or it's not at least literary or whatever. So yeah, the group invented their own awards, so we could actually sort of, and there are categories like best movie novelization, best young adult movie tie-in novel. Generally, the categories used to be split apart into one for like science fiction and fantasy, because there was so much of that, and then also a separate category for like mainstream stuff for, crime novels and suspense novels based on CSI or whatever. But yeah, so, again, it's a weird little niche of publishing and largely overlooked in that it didn't have its own organization, it didn't have its own awards, but now we do. And like I said, a long and venerable treatment. I've done some research going into this, and yeah, media tie-ins go back, there were novelizations of silent movies. There were, novels based on old radio shows and comic books, and, so it's not just, people sometimes think, well, that's a kind of a new thing, isn't it? No. I've traced them back to like 1919 or something, And even the word like novelization, I once saw a novelization of The Jazz Singer with Al Jolson that said, the novelization of the new hit Talkie on the cover, so the word goes way back.
It's funny because I recently, I'd say within the last 2 to 3 years, saw the novelization for West Side Story.
Last night, someone on Facebook posted the cover for the novelization of Orgy of the Damned, which is this old Ed Wood movie. Really, Orgy of the Damned got a novelization, But no, old silent movies starring Houdini got a novelization. The old Douglas Fairbanks version of The Thief of Baghdad, in the 20s got a novelization. There was a novelization of the original King Kong, which is one of the ones that keeps staying in print because it tends to get reissued every time someone remakes King Kong. And some publisher gets the right idea to reissue the old 1933 novelization.
See, now that's interesting. I would love to go back and see some of those novelizations then, because in particular, novelizing a silent film, I think, would be really interesting to add the dialogue in and such. So to fill in the gaps.
Not have to put it on the intertitles, yeah. But I'm not sure. I think even the word novelization may predate cinema. I think there may have been like novelizations of hit plays back in the day.
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised. I tried to trace the origin of the word one day. I did a lecture on this years ago at the Library of Congress, and I spent a weekend researching this. And yeah, I think the word even made, there were novelizations of hit plays, right?
To sort of, and vaudeville shows or whatever.
And it's something actually that I find annoying myself personally, just the whole thing, because to me, like I say, novelization of a silent film, you'd be filling in gaps, you'd be adding more dialogue, you'd be enriching it and such. To me, that's a skill. To me, that's an art unto itself, and not to take away from anybody who creates, original, and I'm going to use air quotes here, novels and such, because we can all make the argument that there are only 7 original ideas in the world and such. But to me, to not recognize that on a greater scale, when you see some of these novelizations that people do, I always tease Keith about his first book he ever did, Gargantua, which was his novelization. But you want to know something, Greg? Honest to God, he made that movie palatable by reading the book.
You may or may not remember, I'm the guy who hired him to do that.
Yep.
I was actually the editor on Gargantua,
yes.
Which for those of you who are listening, and I suspect our listeners are all thinking, what the hell was Gargantua? Gargantua was a bad ripoff of Godzilla that aired on the Fox channel back in 1998. And yes, there was a novelization, and I was the editor, and former Chronic Rift alumni Keith DeCandido, that was in fact his first novel, which he wrote under a pseudonym.
Yes.
K. Robert Andreassi.
Yes.
See, I can't believe I still remember that, because that was, I think, 1998.
But
and I only know that because the movie was put out to, cash in on the Matthew Broderick version of Godzilla, which is a couple of reboots ago.
Right. But I'll maintain that things like that where, he filled in the gaps, where there were many potholes in the movie and such. It made it more enjoyable. That when I finally did watch the movie, it wasn't so bad, although I was kind of missing certain elements, then going, well, wait a minute, Keith did this and did that. And I see this with a number of novelizations, whether it be, the author explaining certain things, or in some cases too, the novelization comes out before the final edit of the film, so certain scenes that were in the film are no longer there. Isn't that correct?
That's often the case, because, it's worth explaining, because I find this is a source of confusion. 99 times out of 100, the guy who wrote the novelization has not seen the movie. I describe the job as writing a 300-page description of a movie you haven't seen yet. Because it's a matter of timing, that you're writing the book at the same time they're making the movie, so that the book can land at the same time the movie is in the theaters. So inevitably, you're working from an early version of the script, and whatever visual reference you can pry out of the studio, sketches, post-production, maybe if you're lucky, the trailer came out while you're writing the book, and you can sit down and watch the trailer frame by frame, and she's wearing a red dress in that scene, But I stress this because this actually confuses people. In fact, I remember I used to think that the author would clearly got to see the movie before they wrote the book, of course. And then, but you left out the best part. It wasn't in the script, And yeah, a lot of times you write stuff that's in the script that gets cut out, And sometimes the studio lets you keep that stuff in, and sometimes they make you cut it out.
Right.
I actually have one funny story about that. I remember on one of the Underworld novelizations, and I wrote a bunch of Underworld novelizations, there was a scene that they asked me to cut out because it was not going to be in the final cut of the movie. And I actually argued the point, in part because I wanted a decent page length. But also, well, I said it's a nice scene, and it actually kind of connects points A through B, and it doesn't actually contradict anything that comes later. It's just, you guys cut it out for time, but it does kind of explain how this character got from point A to B. Can we keep it in? And they actually went to the director, and the director was, all right, well, I'm going to add that scene when we put out the director's cut, on DVD. So, yeah, absolutely, keep that scene in the book. So it was worth, following up on that.
Right. Right. Now, that's something, too, because, as you mentioned, you did the Underworld novelizations. You did one for Batman, The Dark Knight Rises. You also did Planet of the Apes. Now, there's a distinction I'm curious about, because with Batman, you already had Batman Begins and such. So, because I know, I've done a couple of tie-in stuff, short stories and things. I did a Star Trek novella for the SCE line and such like that. And I know Keith was always, one of the big things he always told me was get the voice right. And I'm curious, something like Batman, okay, you already had Batman Begins to work with. And like you say, a lot of times you've never seen the movie. But something like, say, Daredevil or Planet of the Apes, where it's all brand new. I mean, yeah, you're familiar with apes because you know the 60s movies, maybe if you even actually watched the 2001 movie. But how do you find your voice so that you give that feeling? Because I know, as a kid, one of my favorite novelizations of all was from the $6 Million Man episode, The Secret of Bigfoot, by Michael Jan. And to me, I could read that over and over again, and did as a kid, and felt I was watching the show. How do you toe that line so that you can still give the audience the experience, or is that a major concern to you?
Well, no, I think you definitely, especially when you're doing a, quote, original novel, like an original Star Trek novel or an original Librarian's novels, you want to get the voice of the characters right. Nothing, in my experience, annoys readers more than, Riker wouldn't say that. In the case of the movie novelizations, well, actually, I had it kind of easy because in the case of, you mentioned both Batman and Planet of the Apes. Well, in both cases, I was coming in and novelizing the third films of the trilogy. I did The Dark Knight Rises, which was the third, and I did War from the Planet of the Apes. So but the trick is immersion to a large degree. I watched the first two movies over and over again, and I watched the first two of the new Planet of the Apes trilogy movies over and over again. Although that was less about getting the voice, since the apes mostly use sign language. But
right.
But I do find immersion. If I'm doing something, and that's almost more of a case because when you're writing a movie novelization, a lot of the heavy lifting has already been done by the screenwriter. They figured out the plot and the dialogue and everything. What tends to drive me nuts is trying to figure out the visuals, because scripts tend to be very lean. They'll just say, and then, costumes and set designs aren't in the script.
Right.
And in fact, sometimes there'll be something just like, we read along and, and then there's a really kick-ass fight sequence. Thank you. I've got to get a chapter out of, and then there's really a kick-ass fight sequence. Or, she walks into the room and all heads drop. Well, great. Tell me, but just because that's not the screenwriter's fault, because that's not his job. He's not the fight choreographer. He's not the costume designer. He just says she walks into a room, is she wearing a little black dress? I don't know. I tend to obsess over the visuals. So, and it's like the location. So, but when I'm doing in a quote original novel, and I'm distinguishing from novelizations here, where I'm writing a new novel set in the world of Star Trek, The Librarians, Warehouse 13, you want to get the voices of the characters right, and I do that by immersion. I binge watch. That's the modern term for it. And it's very easy nowadays. I'll just sit down and, when I'm working on, a CSI book, I'll watch a CSI novel every night before going to bed, just so I got Grissom's voice down. Now, some characters like classic TOS are burned into my brain. I have known their voices since I was 8. But even then, I did a Star Trek novel involving 7 of 9 a few years ago. And at that point, honestly, Voyager had been off the air for several years, and my own Voyager novel was 15 years in the past, and I sat down to write the Voyager scenes, and I was like, okay, I really haven't watched Voyager for a while. and I want to make sure I got Seven's voice right. So I actually went down and binge watched, season 6 of Voyager, and with an emphasis on all the 7 of 9 episodes, just to, oh, right, I remember now, Harry Kim, Chakotay, Janeway, okay, I'm getting their voices back here, and we'll binge watch to get the voices back.
Well,
and you're right, it's harder if it's a brand new series you've never seen, but
right, well,
fortunately with
I'm sorry, because that's like one thing, because like you did, the novelization for Daredevil, and you mentioned like a fight scene, and all the screenwriter does is kick-ass fight scene. So then do you have to go back to the studio and say, hey, I need a little guidance here. Has this been choreographed yet? Do you have any images and such? Because it's one thing to say the dress was black when clearly on the screen it was red, but it's another thing if your fight scene doesn't match the fight scene on the screen. So how does something like that work?
Well, it depends. If it's the big action finale and it's a complicated thing with lots of moving cars and exploding cars and trains, generally the script writers try to explain it out. It's not like the script writer completely. I've only once or twice run into, and then there's a kick-ass fight scene. But even still, sometimes trying to figure out the logistics, and okay, so I'll sit around, trying to figure out, okay, so they're on a cliff and they swing down a cliff, and if you don't actually have the steps in mind, it can be very hard to visualize. And sometimes I will ask a question. I try not to abuse the privilege. There is back and forth. You can talk to the licensing people, but I try not to drive them nuts with, okay, is it a red dress or a black dress? But, I do remember there was one where, okay, there's a kick-ass fight scene. I said, okay, I got to know how badly are the other people injured? Are they just beaten up? Are they knocked senseless? Are they killed? Are they shot to smithereens with a machine gun? Oh, okay, it's like a martial arts fight, and they're left sort of battered and bleeding at the end. Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. And I had to pretty much make up the fight scene,
Right.
Now, but a lot of times if it's a big elaborate action sequence, my problem is just trying to visualize it, since again, I'm desperate for, and sometimes it's like I said, they'll send me, can you please send me illustrations or photos of, a good chunk of War for the Planet of the Apes takes place in what's basically this giant internment camp for apes. And I was going nuts trying to visualize that place and drawing maps of it. And okay, Woody Harrelson's headquarters is here. The orangutan pin is here. The entrance to the tunnels are here. And at one point they did send me a bunch of, pre-production paintings, and I was staring at them trying to, okay, so the scarecrows are up on the hill there, and that's where the trains are, and that's where the fuel tank is, and I'm trying to visualize. I spend an awful lot of time trying to sort of visualize the scenes in my head,
Right.
But I remember, it's funny, I was actually watching The Dark Knight Rises again the other night by coincidence for the first time in years. And I was sort of watching these, oh, right, that plane crash sequence, I went nuts trying to visualize that, Because there's always sort of when you finally sit in the theater, you go, oh, that's what that looks like,
Right, yeah.
Oh, wow,
Now,
and to be honest, the studios are helpful and they send you what they can, but sometimes there aren't photos or whatever, or, the sketches don't resemble. I remember once there was one movie I panicked because I was working on the book and I had the script, and they ended up showing a preview from the movie at the New York Comic Con. And stupid me, I did not go up to New York Comic Con. But suddenly I'm reading all these reports from New York Comic Con about this amazing footage that they showed at the convention. And I'm jealous because, oh great, now 300 people have seen a scene I haven't. And wait a minute, I don't remember this scene. This scene isn't in the script I have. And there were some panicking phone calls. Why is everybody talking about this amazing scene they saw at Comic Con that isn't in my script, The entire world now knows about a scene I don't know about.
And you need that scene.
Yeah, so I was on the phone. Please, someone tell me what happens in this scene, because that scene wasn't in my script. I have, like I said, things get changed. Stuff gets added to movies I never heard of. Stuff gets cut. So, no movie novelization is ever going to be identical to the movie simply because, no matter how faithful I try to be, and I try to be faithful, I've had people come up to me and, you left out the best part, sorry, dude, it wasn't in my script,
Right.
One of my, if you'll indulge me, one of my favorite stories about this is I actually got a very nice letter once from a concerned mom who was very grateful for the fact that I left the gratuitous sex scene out of my novelization. And thank you, Mr. Cox, for having the good taste and decency to leave that gratuitous sex scene out of, your novelization. I didn't have the heart to tell her I didn't know about it. It got added in post-production. If they told me about the gratuitous sex scene, it would have been there, I promise,
So now you just come across as all virtuous and you can't take the credit.
Well, on the flip side, though, there's at least one novelization where they did cut a big sex scene out of the movie, but it's still in my novelization, since no one told me they cut it out. So, novelization comes with bonus sex scene. So.
Now, where did all this begin for you? What was your first tie-in novel or tie-in writing assignment? Let's put it that way. Maybe, I don't know if it was a short story or if it was a novel.
It was a short story. 2 short stories, in fact, and it all starts with Batman. Way back around the time of the second Tim Burton movie, Batman Returns, which was that 1992, I think?
I believe so.
But, yeah, that was the one with the Penguin and Catwoman.
Right.
And they put out a couple of short story collections, The Further Adventures of Batman featuring the Penguin, The Further Adventures of Batman featuring Catwoman, featuring stories about Catwoman and Penguin to cash in on the movie. And a friend of mine, who's probably a mutual friend of ours, John Gregory Betancourt, got wind of the fact that DC needed a whole bunch of Penguin and Catwoman stories right away. And he knew somebody who knew somebody at DC. We got in touch with them, and we ended up writing Penguin and Catwoman stories. And yay, that was how kind of my first tie-in. That's how we got started. I like to joke that I've been writing this stuff since Michelle Pfeiffer was Catwoman. But, in fact, funny story, I got lots of funny stories. When I was out in Hollywood working on The Dark Knight Rises, I happened to make this joke to some young woman at Warner Brothers, and she went, "Wow, that was the year I was born." And I felt very old. Anyway, then shortly thereafter, I did my first novel, which was a Deep Space Nine novel. And again, the story was, there was this, I got a call from a mutual friend, John Ordover, who told me that, hey, they're doing this new Star Trek show, and Pocket Books needs a lot of Deep Space Nine novels in a hurry. They suddenly had openings because they had to launch a whole new Deep Space Nine line, and was I interested in doing a Deep Space Nine novel? And the rest is history.
Right. Now, when it comes to that, now there's something else too, because I remember when the Star Trek: The Next Generation comic book came out by DC. It took a lot of flack because it was a 6-issue miniseries. It took a lot of flack for not looking very much or feeling very much like the series, even the first season series, as much as people at times lambast that as well. Were you able to get at least a view of something from Deep Space Nine, or was that also a quick turnaround type thing where it was like, we want to get it out around the same time as the premiere of the episodes?
As I recall, I was like Deep Space Nine number 11 or number 15 or something. So I remember I started working on the book before the show aired. And I was working on the basis, I had the script for the first episode, I had a series Bible, and I also had all the publicity that at that point stills were showing up in magazines like Starlog. Mm-hmm. But eventually, thank God, I was still writing the book when the show debuted, so I got to see, I think, like a good chunk of the first season while I was, I wrote the outline before ever seeing a show, but I think I finally had, seen a few episodes at least by the time I was turning in the book.
Right.
I don't know about the folks who wrote Deep Space Nine's number 1, 2, and 3. I was like number 11 or 15 or something.
Right.
Although I do have a story about that. Again, you're sort of going on the basis of what you know. I still occasionally hear from fans who read that book and who think that I don't have the characters quite right, in that Kira, they think, is much too mean and much too abrasive to Bashir. And in my defense, at that point, all I'd read was the script for Emissary.
Right.
And if you remember, in Emissary, Kira has quite a chip on her shoulder about Starfleet taking over. And specifically, there's a scene where she kind of tears Bashir a new one.
Yep.
So, yeah, I got to admit, I jumped on that and ran with it. And that's, okay, so Kira doesn't like Starfleet and Kira doesn't like Bashir, and that's the only thing I knew about those characters at that point. And I ran from it. And yeah, now 30 years later, someone picks it up, and boy, we're used to them becoming close friends and liking each other. And why is Kira such a bitch to Bashir in your book? That's how she was in the very first script, and that's all I knew about her. So, and I picked that up and ran with it. Okay.
And to be fair, she was that way in several episodes going in. I mean, I'm actually starting a rewatch of the show now, and Bashir was something more she could use when necessary, but otherwise she had no use for him.
Right. So like I said, to someone who's picking up the book now and is used to 7 years of them being a close-knit thing, I'm sure it's very jarring. But I said, no, go back and watch the first couple episodes again. I was writing her and Bashir as they appeared in the first couple episodes.
Right.
And I remember the one we actually had a challenge was Dax, because I will, in fact, argue that Dax didn't get a discernible personality until season 2. And we were struggling. I should mention the book was a collaboration with John Betancourt, who I also had worked with on those, Batman stories. We were collaborating back in those days. And yeah, I remember we struggled with Dax. Neither of us could really get, you talk about trying to get a handle on a character's voice. We really, really didn't get a handle on Dax. And I remember at first we didn't use her much, to the point where our editor had to come back and said, where's Dax? And we said we didn't really get Dax. Well, you got to go back and put Dax in the book, so.
Right.
So we had to go back and beef her part up, even though I remember, that was a case where I don't have a hand. I did not feel I had a handle on Dax's voice,
Right.
But
now, when it comes to Star Trek, there are certain authors that, when you point to them, people remember a key Star Trek novel. I mean, you did Voyager, you did Deep Space Nine, you did original series Star Trek and all, and I forget, did you do Next Gen?
I've done a bunch. I've done all the flavors except Enterprise and Discovery.
Okay, but the one that, like for instance, Keith, everybody always points to Articles of the Federation, or Peter David. Many will say Imzadi, but for you, they point to the Eugenics Wars. Now, in terms of that, you were also, that's another one of those things that's sort of the prequel, because you're setting up the whole history there. So when it comes to setting up something like that, how much free reign, because I know Paramount, they want to make sure they also get it right. How much free reign did they give you in terms of crafting this?
A lot of free reign. I don't really remember getting any trouble there, because one thing, that was TOS, and the one thing, to a certain degree, at least back in the day, you had a certain degree of free reign with TOS, the original series, for those who don't know, because at that point, it wasn't still on the air. When you're dealing with a show that's been off the air for 40 years, it's not like you're going to mess up our plans for the season finale. In general, there tends to be more, understandably micromanagement when you're dealing with a show that's currently on the air. And, well, you can't do that because, you might cramp our style for next season. As opposed to, there were no plans to go back and make a movie about the life story of Khan starring Ricardo Montalban, so I wasn't going to, So, yeah, I remember, just for people who don't know what we're talking about, the Eugenics Wars was a series of novels I did that was all about the early years of Khan Noonien Singh, how he, was created, how he rose to power, how he was brought down, had to escape into space from the Botany Bay, all that stuff that's handled in about, 6 lines in Space Seed and The Wrath of Khan. And, I got 2 books out of it, and a third about Khan's exile on Theta Alpha 5.
Right.
And you are right. I am resigned to the fact that, when I die, my obituary will say, Greg Cox, author of The Eugenics Wars and many other Star Trek novels. Because, those are the ones that everyone remembers. I've written something like 20 or so Star Trek novels, but when I go to conventions and everything, it's, oh, you're the guy who wrote Eugenics Wars. So, those are my claim to fame. And I am very proud of those books. Those books were a lot of work. And they're still out there. And it was cool that I got to do the grand saga of Khan Noonien Singh.
So with that in mind, I mean, everything you've done, and it's amazing, because I was surprised when I saw Dark Knight Rises and such. I didn't realize you'd done that novelization and such. You've done novelizations for both The Librarians and why am I blanking on Dean Devlin's other series?
Leverage.
Leverage. I couldn't think for a second there. When it comes down to it, and I know this is often a question that a lot of people struggle with when you ask, especially with the wide breadth of work that they may have, including you. But for you, what are the ones that you stand out to you as the ones you're most proud of?
Oh, like I said, that's always asking someone to
pick their children,
pick their own children,
right.
And this is not a cop-out. What I always like to say is I love the variety. I have done a lot of stuff in a lot of different genres, CSI, horror. I've done science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime thrillers, even one historical romance. And I love the variety because as much as I love, say, Star Trek, I wrote only Star Trek for 20 years, I go insane. But now, I get to do Planet of the Apes, and I get to do Green Hornet, and I get to do lots of different things. But, okay, I guess, I'm very proud of the Eugenics Wars books, in part because that's the ones, like I said, that I'm so amazed. I wrote those books a long time ago. Do I keep stressing how long ago all this is? that the people still come up to me and are like, wow, Clinton was president when I wrote those books, and remember them. I'm proud of 52. I did a novelization. I did a bunch of DC novelizations, not of movies, but of actual comic book miniseries. And for those who don't remember, 52 was this big, epic 52-part comic book series that I turned into a novel, and that was just such a big, epic, sprawling story. I mean, it was 52 issues as a comic book. It was 4 volumes of graphic novels as a comic book, and it's like taking War and Peace and boiling it down to a 300-page novel. And even more than that, because there were all these spin-off issues and tie-in issues and special Ron Thonagor War special 3-part miniseries tying in to the main miniseries. And that was sort of overwhelming. I'm sort of proud of the fact that I took this vast DC Comics miniseries, which starred every single character in the DC universe, from Superman to Detective Chimp, and I like to think I made a coherent novel out of it. Okay, so that was a big, ambitious job, and I'm proud of that one, and people seem to like it. And also, there's just my inner fanboy. There were series I always wanted to do, and there was a part of me that's even still kind of like, oh, wow, I got to write a Planet of the Apes book. I grew up on Planet of the Apes. I read all the original Planet of the Apes novelizations by David Gerald and Jerry Purnell and, John Jake. So to be part of that tradition is really still, kind of cool. I am not so jaded that at times I don't sit down and realize, oh, my God, I'm writing Wonder Woman and getting paid for it. This is wonderful. Okay,
Yeah. Now, speaking of that, you've got this wide breadth, but there's still a lot out there, especially thanks to the way we have Netflix and Hulu and everything now, and classic television coming back and such. If somebody walked up to you today and said, Greg, here's a ton of money. I want a novelization on this. What would you like to tackle?
Well, I got 2 things on my bucket list. Star Wars remains the Mount Everest I have yet to climb. And the other one, and this is nostalgia, the Universal Monsters.
Okay.
I would dearly love to do something with Frankenstein, Wolfman, the creature from the Black Lagoon. We have been like ships who pass in the night. I've never quite been able to seal the deal there. So, yeah, I would love to do something with Universal Monsters, and of course, Star Wars is is the big thing. So of course, that, like I said, that's the Mount Everest I have yet to climb.
Well, now, that might be something there, though, that, because considering Universal now apparently is ditching their plans to do the series of movies in the shared universe, maybe they could do something where at least they could keep the franchise alive through a series of novels.
It's happened periodically. Dark Horse did a bunch of them a few years ago. I found out about that too late, and by the time I knocked on somebody's door, all the slots were filled, and yeah, I really wanted the DC Monster Universe thing to succeed because I was hoping to get in on that action, and maybe there would be, mummy tie-in novels and things, but so I had a vested interest in really wanting that to succeed. But who knows? One of these days, I chased after the novelization of Van Helsing and did not get it, and felt much better about it after I saw the actual movie. But at the time that sounded like really cool. So, they keep trying to, do something with the Universal Monsters and revive them, and I have my theories about that, but hopefully someday, that's...
Someday.
They're talking about remaking the Creature from the Black Lagoon again,
Okay.
Hey, I actually give you my pet theory here, if you'll allow me to expound.
Sure.
Which is, honestly, they keep trying to take the Universal Monsters and turn them into a giant, big, tentpole summer blockbuster, as opposed to horror movies. And granted, that worked with the Brendan Fraser mummy thing a zillion years ago. But honestly, I would just sort of scale down. You don't spend $200 million and have to have lots of exploding, cities. Make them lean, mean, horror movies, at a decent budget, have Blumhouse or somebody contract them and do some really scary mummy movies or creature movies or Wolfman movies that are meant to be, R-rated horror movies done at the budget of A Quiet Place or something,
Right.
Instead of trying to, this has to be, a $200 million action epic comparable to the Avengers, because you go back and watch the original movies, they were 90-minute B movies to a certain degree, black and white, and they were not, And yeah, you'd have to make them, darker and scarier and gorier today. But, remember, they were horror movies. They were not big action blockbusters. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I would sort of regroup and go out there and, because as we've seen, you can make money with moderately budgeted, the Conjuring movies or something, Do them at the budget level of The Conjuring or The Quiet Place or something like that, and make them really scary new monster movies, rather than trying to, turn them into a giant Tom Cruise action movie,
Well, unfortunately, that's the problem. It's with the way it is with all the movies. It's why the Star Trek movies, the last three, while enjoyable, they've all kind of been one note because they're all just trying to strive for that summer blockbuster hit.
And I actually like the new movies more than some. I mean, they're, they are space operas, and there were always space battles and things, I like the first and third of the new movies more than the second one.
Yeah.
But no, the cast in those movies is wonderful, and
no, absolutely.
Carl Urban channels DeForest Kelley, so. And like I said, at least, like I said, they're always, Star Trek, especially TOS, always did have a heavy action component to it, Kirk running around fighting the Gorn, barroom fights with, the Tribbles, with the Klingons on the Tribble space station,
Right. Now, this honor you're receiving from the International Association
we haven't even mentioned that yet.
No, we haven't. Now, it's a Grandmaster Award?
Yes, it is basically, it is called the Faust Award. But yeah, basically it's the Life Achievement Award.
Okay.
I am very honored they are giving me what is the sort of, International Association Media Tie-in of Writers, Life Achievement Award. So, which has previously been given to the likes of Peter David and such. So, in recognition of having done this stuff since 1992, And also, I have to think also the fact that, without setting us on a tangent, I've also, in my capacity as a tour editor, have been an editor of media tie-in novels for decades now. So yeah, it's been a big part of my, and I'm very honored to be part of that, you know, to get that award, and, you know, for, you know, it's the Life Achievement Award as one of, you know, someone who's been involved in this business for many, many years. Right. And I'm now struggling to come up with the other past winners. I know Peter David, but other, you know, very, very, I think Christy Golden won like last year or something, but it's very, very great company to be in.
Right.
And since it's coming from my peers, and as we've mentioned, a lot of people don't understand how media tie-in works or the challenges involved or how difficult they are or how much work goes into it. You know, since this is being awarded by peers who have also labored in the vineyards, it makes it even, you know, bigger honor.
Right, right. Now, regrettably, you won't be able to attend, though, the ceremony itself. Will you be sending them a video?
Killing me. I mean, I wonder. I don't know. I have to talk to the folks out there. I flirted with it. I mean, it kills me that I'm not going to be able to go out there, but part of it, it's part of it. You know, by the time I found out, we're talking to San Diego Comic-Con, I even did some inquiries. Okay, is there a hotel room to be had anywhere in San Diego here? You know, is it logistically possible to even, you know, and people are like, well, if you live in Los Angeles, you can drive up. I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. That's a bit of a drive, you know. So it was tempting. I spent a weekend trying to figure out, but also I just, you know, budgets, logistics. It doesn't help that I'm going to another convention the weekend before.
Right.
But I got deadlines. I've got 2 tie-in novels to write, you know. So I hope I'm going to have to sit down and write a speech and find some nice person to, you know, accept the award in my honor and everything. You know, it kills me that, you know, how often you get a Life Achievement Award from your peers, but Lord, San Diego Comic-Con is not something you can just, oh, what the hell, I'll fly out and go to the San Diego Comic-Con,
right,
you know.
Exactly.
Trying to get a membership, trying to get a hotel room. Like I said, I was like, oh, God, Greg, no, you're not going to be able to find a hotel room within 50 miles of, you know.
Exactly, yeah. Now, speaking of which, what do you have coming up that you can share with us?
Oh, sure. Okay, I've got 2 projects that are coming out, one of which is already written and in production and everything, is the 3rd Librarians book, based on the Librarians TV show. I've written 3 of them so far. This comes out in the fall. This is called The Librarians in the Pot of Gold. As you might guess, I'm going full Irish on this one. Leprechauns, banshees, you know, 4-leaf clovers, etc. And I'm also working on a Batman novel, The Court of Owls, which is sort of very loosely based on a storyline from the comic books.
Okay.
And this is another. See, everything comes back to Batman. I started out writing Batman, and here I am writing Batman again, you know.
Right.
So that's actually what I'm writing now, is the Batman book. And like I said, I think that's coming out in the fall, too.
Okay.
But yeah, that's from Titan. And the Librarians novel is coming out from Tor. Mm-hmm. Sadly, Librarians just got canceled, but hey, disappointed Librarians fans, there's still at least one more book coming.
Right. Now, is there anything that, you know, you can't say because of non-disclosure agreements, but that you are working on?
Yeah, let's say I've got some other irons in the fire, and sometimes they aren't done deals, or the contracts haven't been signed yet. But I think I know what my next book is after the Batman book. And I also occasionally, by the way, you know, and I can't talk about this much, I do some ghostwriting as well. I occasionally do some ghostwriting, so there's projects I can never talk about. So
right. Yeah, exactly. Now, Greg, if people want to get a hold of you and offer their congratulations or talk to you about, you know, the Librarians books, the Eugenics Wars, your work for both DC and Marvel, I mean, just to name a few here, I mean, I could go on here, the list would go on. How can they get a hold of you on social media or through email or something?
Well, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. For one thing, I have a website, and my email address is listed on my website. And the website is actually gregcox-author.com, but it's actually easier than that because honestly, Google me. If you Google Greg Cox, I'm pretty much the first thing that comes up. I am not the politician in San Diego. I am not the restaurant reviewer in Chicago. but, I like to think it must drive them nuts. You put in Google, you get Greg Cox author pretty fast. I'm usually one of the first two links,
Right.
Go to gregcoxauthor.com, and my web page is there.
Very cool.
So I'm pretty easy to find hold of that there.
Right. Well, Greg, thank you once again for agreeing to take some time out here, and congratulations on being named for the Lifetime Achievement Award.
That was very exciting. Yeah, I got word of that about a week in advance, and then was sitting on it before I could actually sort of jump onto Facebook and tell the entire world, oh my God. So that was cool. Yeah.
Well, we're even though this is a Lifetime Achievement Award, we know that there's still a long ways to go in terms of your breadth of material that you're going to be producing, and we're looking forward to it.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, old tie-in writers never retire. We just keep writing. Okay,
Well, again, my thanks.
Great. And I'll talk to you soon again.
All right.
Have a great day.
You too, Greg. So, folks, we're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we'll wrap up the show.
This is the Emperor. You're listening to the Sci-Fi Diner podcast. Eat it.
Welcome to the Sci-Fi Diner podcast. Join us, your hosts, Miles P. McLaughlin and Scott Herzog, as we serve up a delightful menu of science fiction interviews and news in the television, movie, DVD, and book world. Test your geek cred with trivia. Top off your meal with the Sci-Fi 5 and 5. Come visit the Sci-Fi Diner podcast at sci-fi-dinerpodcast.com or subscribe to us in iTunes. We're serving up sci-fi from here to the end of the universe.
And we're back here trying something a little different. I positioned my microphone during the interview, and I wanted to just see how this comes out here in terms of sound and such. It's a nice thing when you've got these kind of days where it's just you and nobody else. You can play around with things. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Chronic Rift. Tune in next Sunday here live, 9 a.m., where we're going to be talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think I've had enough time coming down from my depression over the ending of Infinity War. And I know it was part one, but it's still, my God, I haven't felt that bad about something since The Empire Strikes Back. In terms of, oh my God, I got to wait so long. And think about it, with Empire Strikes Back, that was, God, between that and Return of the Jedi was probably about 3 years. So at least we've only got a year's wait for part two of Infinity War. Stay tuned. Stay tuned to all the great shows we've got here coming up on the Chronic Rift Network, including a new episode of the OSI Files, going to be released in audio form from last Friday's live show, plus a new live show this coming Friday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we're going to be talking about the $6 Million Man episode. No, not Little Orphan Airplane. I had to think for a moment. Eyewitness to Murder. We did Little Orphan Airplane. Eyewitness to Murder. So that's going to be this Friday. Take a look. We have a lot of fun there. So until next time, folks, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you once again to Greg Cox for being with me here on the show, taking time out of his busy schedule as he's getting ready for convention season and deadlines and such. So until then, folks, thank you so much, and take care. Have a great week.